we started it back in 2006. It was just the both of us working all hours. So it's like 15 staff across 3 magazines. And my job changed. There's a lot of online
Sure.
reviewers these days, and they're doing reviews. And I kind of watch them and I cringe quite a lot. I remember back when I was doing it originally, I would record it with an audio recorder, like a proper audio recorder. Then I'd get that
Nice.
file, put it into GarageBand, and then I'd
Ah,
chop it all
nice.
up and edited it in GarageBand.
This episode is sponsored by Surfers. Did you know that when you're foiling in cold water, that your ear canal can actually close up? You can grow extra bone, and then you can either lose hearing or you can get infections because the water that gets in cannot get out. So you should protect yourself with surf ears. Surf ears are made to protect your ear, but you can still hear. And that's the important issue. If you're on foil, you still want to hear the environment. So think about your health. Get your surf ears in the link in the description. Stay safe.
This is Up on Foil, the podcast for everyone flying just above the surface. Pump, carve, soar, let's foil!
This episode is also sponsored by Foil Sessions, but more on that later. Welcome to episode number 93 of Up on Foil, the podcast where we talk all about foiling. And let me introduce us real quick. I'm Matt. I'm an average foiler, doing mostly reviews at the moment, but just part-time. And with me today is Rou Chater, Mr. Tonic Mag, a content creator, but a real one. And thank you so much, Rou, for coming on the show. How comfortable are you with sitting on the other side, like being not the one leading the interview?
Yeah, it's good. It's quite funny because I'm sitting here thinking, should I be recording this as well? And then I can release it as an episode on my channel. But it's nice. It's nice to not have to think about the questions and just to relax a little bit. And I've done a few podcasts over the years where I've been the guest. So yeah, I'm quite happy to sit and chill. And apologies that it's taken so long for us to make this happen. I think we've been trying to do it for about 6 months now this year. But I'm really glad that we finally managed to make it happen. So stoked to be here. Thanks for having me on, Matt.
No, that's perfect. You're a busy man, and correct me if I'm wrong. I just saw it on your Instagram. You got 50. You turned 50 this year. You got married as well.
Yeah. So it's been a full on year. I'm pretty flat out regardless. And then when you throw a wedding on top of it, that puts a lot of extra pressure on. And because it was my 50th, when I proposed to my wife, which was about a year ago, we both said, oh, we shouldn't do a 50th and a wedding. Let's just chuck the two together and make it a massive party. So we ended up organizing a 3-day music festival with a wedding in the middle of it. But we had live bands, DJs, 150 people, booked out this incredible venue, and it was bonkers. But I can't actually believe that I managed to find the time to kind of do it all, because the wedding finished and I was like, oh, I'll get my life back and everything will be a bit easier and, I'll have more time. And it just feels like, I just don't have any time still.
So you're just probably filling up the time you have with interesting things. And let's talk about that life. I'm super curious. On your Instagram, you say living a life less ordinary, surfing, foiling, kiting, telling stories, taking photos, and creating content. That's a lot of things. Like today, you just said before we started recording, you had a quick wing session, but a lot of other things to do. Like, do you have a regular day? How does a week look for you?
I'd love to have a regular day. Occasionally, I have a day off. I can't remember the last time I actually took a proper holiday where I didn't do any work. I mean, obviously, I run Tonic magazine, which is a digital wing foiling surf magazine, which covers all aspects of foiling now. Originally, it started off as a paddleboard magazine many years ago, and then we kind of switched it up to embrace foiling. But we also have IK Surf Mag, which is the biggest online kite surfing media outlet, which is huge. So that takes a lot of time as well. So kind of running both of those magazines at the moment. There was a time we had a mountain bike magazine as well, and a ski magazine in the past. So yeah, we've been running Next Element now for 20 years. I think will be the anniversary in September. So we should probably do something to celebrate. But that keeps me pretty busy. And then my wife, I met her 3 years ago, and she has 2 teenage children, and I kind of really like that lifestyle. I was always a bit of a, I didn't have kids before, so I didn't have that time being taken up with children. And then meeting her and having sort of older children has been a real eye opener for me. We also have 3 dogs as well that we have to walk too. So yeah, life just suddenly got really busy, but I really enjoy it, and I enjoy the noise. And I think I'm one of these people that it was busy before. Like I never really have days where I sit around and don't do an awful lot. I'm always kind of going at 110 miles an hour, trying to make everything fit in and getting stressed. I'm sure it's probably not doing me any good health wise, but it's how I roll.
Well, as you said, you just turned 50. How do you feel, man? I mean, you can do everything still, or
Yeah,
is that
yeah.
taking
So
a
I
toll
I
on you?
feel I just ran my fastest 5K about last week. So yeah, Tuesday I ran my
Congratulations.
fastest ever 5K. I'm not a fast runner. I hate running. I absolutely hate running. But I go running
Right.
3
Yeah.
times a week because it keeps me fit, and it helps with obviously that running fitness I find is really good for surfing and for foiling. And when I used to mountain bike, it was really good for that. So I like to think that whilst, yeah, maybe, I am feeling my age a little bit, it doesn't stop me from doing anything. I'm a better foiler than I was 5 years ago by a long margin. I'm sort of getting better at that every time I go out, and all the effort I put into that, I'm constantly looking to improve. So yeah, just trying to be fit, healthy. Probably drink too much beer, although I've got an alcohol-free one this evening.
Cheers, man.
So yeah, just trying to sort of look after myself. But it's funny with turning 50. When I turned 40, I was really worried about it. And I was in Cabarete. We were kite surfing for the winter, and it was my 40th birthday. And the whole year running up to it, I'd kind of been thinking, oh no, I'm going to turn 40. I'm going to be old. This is really rubbish. And then in the lead up to it, I got really worried about it. And then the minute I woke up in the morning and was 40, I was like, oh, I don't really care anymore. Like, it's just a number. I'm exactly the same as I was yesterday. I'm not really any different. But then for 50, my wife, she turned 50 a couple of years ago, and she was really worried about it. And I think it's probably a bit different for women, perhaps. But I think because I was organizing the wedding, I genuinely didn't get a chance to think about turning 50 because we were so busy organizing this wedding. And my birthday was on the Sunday, the wedding was on the Saturday, and I think about 12:30 at night, we were like all dancing to some DJs and smoke machines and lasers and all sorts of crazy stuff going on. And someone just went, "Oh my God, you're 50." And I'm like, "What?" And I looked at them also like, "Yeah, I'm 50. Right, let's stay up till the small hours and make a real party of it." But that was the first time I thought about it. Um, and then, yeah, I'm always kind of pushing myself. So running that fast 5K, I basically went out. I was staying at my parents' last week, which I mentioned to you because they weren't very well. So I sort of raced back to look after them because they're getting a bit older. And I have a running loop that I do at home. And whenever I stay with them at Christmas or whenever it might be, if I'm visiting, I always do the same 5K running loop. And so it's good sort of series of years of how fast I am around this 5K. And I went out running and I got these new shoes, and they're quite bouncy, and I didn't know that shoes could be
Oh, that
really that
always
much of
help.
a difference. So they're a bit of a cheat shoe, I think. That's why I'm going much quicker.
No, no, no. It's
And
fine. It's fine.
and yeah, and I ran this 5K and I was 1 second off the fastest time. And I turned myself inside out, like I nearly died at the end of it. I was lying on the floor outside the shop, just like trying to get the air back into me. And I'd like really pushed myself. And I was like, oh, that must be a personal best. And I was 1 second off. And I was like, so annoyed I was 1 second off. I went out 2 days later and took 2.5 minutes off it. So
Wow. That is
yeah,
impressive.
I'm definitely feeling fit, feeling healthy, and yeah, 50 doesn't really bother me too much. It's kind of just a number, I think.
This episode is sponsored by Foil Session. It's the app that lets you track all your foiling sports. And in June, you're able to win an Apple Watch. Go download the app, use one of the 5 free sessions, and share your track on Instagram. Tag Foil Sessions app, and yeah, with a little bit of luck, you get to win a new Apple Watch. Good luck.
Listen, Rou, speaking about fitness and health and whatnot, if you see me wobbling around, I'm standing on a balance board. Like Indiana sent me these balance board. So that's the only
Nice.
exercise I get in today. So I'm not dizzy or anything. It's just what I do. Usually, also it keeps my ADHD like somewhere aligned, which is nice. Let's talk about that Tonic mag, man. Um, like because there's a lot you have to do there. But I imagine it's not only you who works there. Can you maybe talk about the team and what your specific job is with it?
Yeah, so years ago, as I'm sure you're aware, the industry's in a bit of a bad state at the moment. We've had a couple of bad years off the back of the COVID boom with the overstocking issue. And now, obviously, the Iran crisis has put a lot of pressure on pricing and raw materials and stuff like that. So it's kind of tough. So there was a period about 4.5, 5 years ago where I was kind of semi-retired. So when we started Next Element, which is the publishing company that does everything that we do, and I launched it with my brother Alex. He's a really good computer coder, so he does all the technology behind the scenes and writes all the apps, and he's constantly updating all of our software in the background that we use. It's all proprietary and stuff that we've made ourselves. So when we started it back in 2006, it was just the both of us working all hours, trying to make this thing, and we kind of did it all. And then as the business expanded and we grew, we started hiring people like salespeople, editors, and people to help out. And at one point, I think the peak was we had 15 staff across all the
Oh wow.
magazines. So it's like 15 staff across 3 magazines, and my job changed from literally doing a lot of the roles to suddenly I had people working for every magazine doing everything. So they would publish the whole magazine. So I wouldn't even really have that much control over what went into the magazines. I would let them choose, and I would just kind of look at it and cross the I's and dot the T's at the end. But I didn't want to get too involved in it. I wanted to let the editors kind of run it and look after it. So we had editors, salespeople, web editors, obviously the Technique team that have been with us for a long time. They were working on it. And then a few other sort of freelancers around that were doing photos and stuff like that. But as the industry's shrunk and contracted, and as things have got tough, we've had to diversify a little bit. And so we've cut the staff right down now. So I'm back working pretty much full time on the magazines. I've got a girl called Rachel Hooper, who's really good, who started with us about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. And she's really keen. She's helping us out with all of the website side of things. So a few people that are listening might have heard of Tonic Mag. They might have seen us on social media. We have a rule that we have to publish a story every 3 hours, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there's
Oh wow.
constantly content going up. And that's how you
Okay.
have a good amount of web traffic, right? And that's hard to do. But we have software in place and systems in place that make it easy. So Rachel does a lot of that day-to-day stuff. And then what I tend to do is oversee the magazine content. And that was one of the reasons we launched the podcast this year. Was it was a good way to run a podcast and then put that content into the magazine. So it was a good way to kind of double up. So you get, a podcast out of it, you get a video out of it, you can make a story out of it for the magazine, and you can kind of fill the content up that way. But yeah, it's changed a lot in the last few years, which is why I'm kind of pretty flat out and pretty busy. We've got testers that help with testing. I love foiling. I was one of the first people to try the original Nash wing surf, or whatever they called it, back in 19, what was it? No, 2018, I think it was. I've got the t-shirt somewhere, but it was that original launch for that. And Robbie Nash was there, and he's telling us about this amazing new sport. And we were all just like, no, I can't see that catching on. But I was a kite surfing fanatic at the time. And I kind of thought, look, if I don't have a go at it, then I'm not really a journalist. So I've got to have a go at it. And I had a go at it. I was been kite foiling for about, I think about 5 years at that point. I think 2015, I started kite foiling. So I was a kite foiler. I could kite foil pretty well. But yeah, so I had to go at wing foiling kind of when it first started. So I've been foiling for a while, but I don't feel with some of the products like downwind foils, I'm not a great downwind foiler. I sort of started putting a lot of time into it last year, but didn't really crack it. And then it got cold. So we've got Jack Galloway, who's been an editor for us in the past. He's one of the best downwind foilers in the UK. So he kind of takes on that. But a lot of the wing testing, I'll do. A lot of the foil testing, I'll do. A lot of the board testing, I'll do. And then we've just taken on a new video guy as well. So he's helping out a guy called John Siddle, and he's producing a lot of our video content. So yeah, there's not a big team at the moment, but it's enough to kind of get through.
All right. So you do the wing reviews, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And foil
Is
reviews and board reviews and bit of everything.
I want to, if I may just quickly talk about wing reviews, because I kind of stopped winging for almost a year. I did nothing but para winging. And then I was in
Yeah.
Sardinia, this 5 to maybe 12 knots of wind, which is really not for para winging. And then I fell back in love with winging again. And I'm on my chase for a new wing. I'm looking for a new wing. And I was just curious, how do you go about when reviewing a wing? What's your strategy? Can you help me out here?
So I don't want to give too many secrets away because there's a lot of online
Sure.
reviewers these days and they're doing reviews and I kind of watch them and I cringe quite a lot with what they're doing and how they're doing them. I'm not talking about you in particular. I've seen a few of your reviews. I saw one of your videos where you're on your balance board actually, which I really liked, and talking about how you edit your stuff whilst on your balance board. I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, so I think there's like a new breed of reviewer, and what we do whenever we review something is we look at who it's for. Like every product has been designed for someone. You know, that designer has made that product with somebody in mind, whether that's themselves, you know, a customer that they're looking to fill a hole with a product. So it's always been made with somebody in mind. So whilst it might not be your favorite bit of kit, it will work really well for somebody out there. Like I've got two wings on test at the moment, one from Starboard and one from Armstrong, and they're very, very different, but they're both very, very good. And you
Mm-hmm.
know the difference in that one of them is super stiff. You know, it's the new Armstrong wing that they've just released, which has got this unbelievably stiff airframe, which is fantastic for light wind pumping, getting up on the foil and having lots of power and being super stable. But when it's really windy and it's gusty, when that gust hits, you just get, if you're not ready for it, you're straight out the front door. And then the wing from Starboard is different construction and it's much more mellow and much easier to ride and much more forgiving. And so it's not sort of saying that one of those wings is better than the other. It's recognizing that, hey, this wing's going to be really good for beginners and people who are kind of new to the sport, or someone who's just looking for something that's easy to fly and they don't want to be thinking about it too much. But hey, the other wing, which is the performance wing, you know, if you want something to go as fast as you possibly can and to be as solid as you possibly can because you're pumping a lot or you're riding in light winds, then that's going to be perfect for you. So we always try and put ourselves in the mind of the person it's designed for and find out who it is designed for. You know, I've been testing kites since 2004 when I first started working in the industry testing products. So you've got to sort of recognize that, you know, it's there for someone. And I feel like a lot of the reviewers are just like, hey, this is the best wing ever because it's the latest wing ever. And then suddenly it's, you know, it affects a lot of the industry sales. And I think, you know, some of these reviewers have got quite a big audience now, and then they say something and then that's it. It just kills a brand, sales dead. And you sort of watch it and you think, well, you could have maybe thought about who that was for and, you know, recognize that, you know, certain things perhaps don't suit your style of riding, but that doesn't mean it's
Mm-hmm.
not good for the next person, you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
we're all
Sure.
different, right? We all like different things on the water, and it's kind of understanding that. So yeah, the testing's definitely one of the hardest things to do. We're often not the first out with our tests because where we live, we don't get pretty regular conditions. Like I live out in Pembrokeshire in Wales. It's right in the very west of Wales, and we get some incredible waves and amazing conditions, but it's frontal, so it depends on the weather. So we're sort of at the mercy of the wind and the weather. But also, I like to spend a lot of time testing products, right? I don't want to jump on it, ride it once or twice and then write a review or do a video review for it. I want to make sure I've used it, I've understood it, I've worked out who it's for, and I've put a bit of you know, real time into that review. So yeah, we're probably not the quickest, but I like to think that we're pretty honest. And another thing with it as well is we've upset quite a few people in the past. And some people say, you might get this, oh, brands are just paying for reviews. And I think with
Hmm.
the specific reviewers, that's sometimes true. With us, it's never if you're working with us, we'll review your equipment, but that doesn't mean say that we're going to say it's a good product if it's not a good product. And we've actually had some serious discussions with brands in the past. And the other thing we don't do is we would never just review it, think it's rubbish, and then publish it saying it's rubbish. We would always speak to the brand and say, hey, look, this product, we can't get our head around it. We're normally, if it's not working, we'll get it through a few of our testers. So we know a few people that we can rely on to say, hey, what do you think of this? Do you like it? And if it's really not suiting anyone, then we can go back and speak to the brand. And sometimes it's a manufacturing issue. And that can be the reason why it's not working, because they've given the designs to the factory for mass production after the prototyping and something's gone wrong. Other times it's just genuinely not a great product. That doesn't happen that often, but occasionally it can happen. I remember there was a brand that launched a whole range of kites a while back. And it was just not enough time for them to produce them, right? So they rushed it all to market, and we had massive discussions about whether we were going to publish our review. And they were really good. They said, you know what, it's an honest review. We'd rather you publish it. We get a bad review, but then when we come to you in a year's time with better kites that we admit we've slightly pushed to market, perhaps, then we'll know that your review's honest, and we're getting a good review from you guys. So I think, yeah, honesty's the main thing, but also thinking about who that product's for.
That makes a lot of sense. And you said you take a lot of time, which I think is super important. For me, taking time is one thing for me to write it, to understand it, but also then to film it. When
Yeah.
you film these things, do you film that yourself? Do you have always like a team with you? Um, do you first test it and then have a team who films it? How do you work on those?
So I normally test it first and then we'll film it. And I normally self-film most things. I've got a buddy here with a drone, but you know what it's like, right? He's at work, the wind's up, it's the window I've got to go, the sun's
Yeah.
shining. So, we've got GoPros and Insta360s, and we kind of try and make it look as good as possible. I think the filming it is probably the hardest thing to do, especially for us, because it's not always sunny here. It's quite often raining. And so that's probably what takes the time, and it is, definitely the hardest thing to do. And hats off, some of these, reviewers, some of their content and the way they're filming stuff is incredible. And I know how much time that takes and how much effort that is. So fair play for, doing all of that, because it is hard to get the reviews filmed. That's probably the toughest bit, I think.
When you work with a brand and you're well established, obviously. Do brands approach you? Do you see something online and do you talk to the brands from your uh, like your motivation on? How do you choose what you will review?
So generally it's brands that we're working with and got a relationship with. And we've got a relationship with most of the brands over the years. So it's just whether they want us to review the products. That sometimes, they might not want us to review it, because whether they know it might not be super happy with it and they think we might be a bit too honest, so we don't get the call. And then when they've got the product they really like, they're like, yeah, let's get it to them. But yeah, generally it's the brands that we're working with or brands that we've got a relationship with. If we see something that's super cool, we'll always reach out and say, hey, just seen this online. It looks great. Can we have a chat about how we might be able to work together to get it to our audience and tell our audience about it? So, yeah, it's kind of a bit of both, I would say. Brands that we're existing working with, and then someone might come out with a crazy new product, and we're like, wow, that's going to be really interesting for our readers. There's a flip side to it all as well. Is obviously the people that enjoy our content. We have to be thinking about how we're delivering that and what we're delivering and whether it's valuable to them as well. So it's kind of thinking about the reader as well as just what we might want to review. There's a big swing. I saw your video about ditching winging, which I thought was really interesting, because I think the industry's sometimes a victim of its own, gets hooked up on the new thing, especially with foiling. But it happened in kiting, right? It just went through these phases of, it was all about surfboards, then it was all about hydrofoils. Now it's all about big air, and they're just ignoring all of the other people that are doing the sport. And I think at the detriment to the sport a little bit. And I think with foiling, we're so lucky. I can't imagine, I started doing water sports when I was 7 years old, windsurfing back in the 80s. And I can't imagine then, I could never imagine a better sport than windsurfing would come along. And then kite
Yeah.
surfing came along, and you're like, hey, we've completed it. This is amazing. And then kite surfing with a surfboard came along, and suddenly you're riding all these incredible waves all around the world, just going, oh my God, this is like the best thing ever. And then it's like, oh, suddenly hydrofoils are a thing. And you're like, whoa, this is like changed the game again. Like it can't get any better than this, surely. And then wing foiling comes along and we're like, wow, this is the pinnacle and this is the best. And then prone foiling rocks up, and then, downwind foiling, and now para winging. And it's so easy as people that work in the industry to jump on these things and get blinkered by it and just think that's it. But what I believe is, the majority of people doing the sports are probably just wing foilers, right? And they've
Yep.
got families,
100%.
they've got kids, they're busy, they've got a full-time job because they need one to be able to afford all the kit, especially with the prices going through the roof. So, they maybe get a weekend. Right now, I worked this out when I was at school. I sat there and said, what do I want to do with my life? There's 52 weekends in a year. So if I get a proper job, I can go windsurfing 52 weekends in a year. Now, out of those 52 weekends, half of them are not going to be windy. So you're down to like, 20, 21 weekends, maybe 25 weekends. Some of those you're going to have family commitments and things that you've got to do. So you're not going to be able to get on the water. And suddenly I was like, whoa, if I get a proper job, I'm not actually going to get that much time to get on the water. It's going to limit what I can do. So I became a windsurfing instructor, and the rest is history. But I'm very aware that the people that are the backbone of this industry and this sport are the customers that are doing that. They're working, they're finding the time to get on the water, and they don't have the time to go and learn to para wing, and they don't want to go back to being a beginner again.
Yeah.
They've learned to wing. Maybe when they've reached a level of winging, when they're like, happy riding in waves and they can do all their tacks and jives, they might be interested in it. But I just feel like the majority of the sport is wing foiling still, and it's important to kind of recognize that. So it's good to see you're back winging. And, as you know, there's a time and a place for a para wing. Like I think my arms are about 6 inches longer after clinging onto a 4.3 today when it was 30 knots. So yeah, it's one of those ones. If I'd had a wing, it would have been fine. Like I wouldn't have felt
Yeah.
it at all.
Yeah.
But on the para wing, it's it's hard. So I think I think the industry just needs to, recognize that wing foiling is the backbone of it.
And also not just having the latest gear. Like in Sardinia, when I was on this wing foiling sailing trip, people were riding with 3, 4-year-old gear. And they were actually, some of them were on foil more than people with the newest stuff that was just a little bit too small. And he with that slow front wing, that huge tractor of a wing, he was foiling more than others. So that's actually, the longevity of these things is also super important. And maybe you and also me, who always try the newest stuff, well, maybe the old one was good already and the new one is just a lot of
Yeah,
mark.
100%. There's a lot of marketing about it being faster, lighter, stiffer, stronger. I think in foiling, the sport's progressing so quickly. That's true. Like you'll know from the second generation of para wings to now, we're kind of getting into the third generation.
Yeah.
How much better they've got, and that sort of the change in that is quite dramatic. But I think with wings, they've kind of leveled out a little bit. Like, if you want a stiff wing, you can have a really stiff wing. If you want something with a bit of flex to it, you can have something with a bit of flex to it. But you definitely don't need to be on the latest, greatest gear to have fun. A lot of people message me and they're like, oh, I'm thinking of changing my kit, and I haven't quite cracked the jibe yet, and I'm thinking that this wing or this foil might, and I'm just like, genuinely it won't. Like if you're at the level where you've not cracked jibing, you probably,
Yeah.
the only thing that's going to fix that is more time on the water and being used to your gear. And throwing a curveball by changing something is just going to make it harder and take you a few steps back. So yeah, I'm very big advocate of, right new kit when it's right and when people are ready for it, but also making the most of what you've got, and there's a great secondhand market out there. If someone's listening to this podcast and they're thinking about getting into winging or they're interested in it, there's so much gear that's secondhand that's great. It's in really good nick. It's works just fine. And yeah, don't overlook that at all. People say it's too expensive to get into the sport, but if you go the second-hand route, you can get
Yeah.
some real bargains.
100%. Although I must say, like, my maybe disinterest of winging had something to do with my old wing. The one I had, it was a Gong V2 soft handles. And really, that was also part of why I didn't want to wing anymore. And now I have the newer ones, not the newest, but also like 1, 2 year old wings that are way better. And that's also where the fun came back a little bit. You talked before about para winging. And you are in the industry, obviously, kind of have to do it. Were you looking forward to doing it? How was your journey?
No, I was looking forward to it, I guess. There's actually, I'll just on. You just mentioned about that, getting modern wings, making it better. So I will chuck in. There's a foil that I've been riding, which is the Cabrina Prestige 905, and that foil reignited my love of wing foiling. Like I was kind of like just a bit over it. I wasn't really. I could wing foil, right, and it was just like I was a bit flat, and I wasn't really enjoying it. And then I got that foil, and it was like, oh my god, like it suddenly stepped things up a level and made it really fun again, right? Because the
Hmm.
performance was so much better. So there is an element of switching up kit, and that can make your enjoyment better. But yeah, with the Power Wing journey, I saw it, I was really excited by it. Ozone sent me a 3 meter pocket rocket, and they sent it at the start of the summer. And the start of the summer is when all our wind disappears. And they were like, "Oh, it's going to need to be really windy for this." So I was like, "Okay." So I had like a first session. I like went out, and there was like nowhere near enough wind. And with
That's
the power wing,
terrible.
right? You've got nothing to
Yeah.
lean against, and I'm just falling in and just going, well, I'm sort of get that. I like the fact I didn't have to pump it up. I like the fact I just whipped it out and rode around on it, but I didn't get on foil because there wasn't any wind. And actually, I've got a video that I never published that, I'm talking and you can see it's just a mirror on the water and this thing's not even flying anymore. And I'm like, right, yeah, I'm done with this. And so then I was constantly trying to find like enough wind to use it. And when I finally got up and riding, it was like 45 knots and it was way overpowered. And I'm like, oh, this is
Yeah.
just like a nightmare again. So I said to Oz, I said, look, can I swap it? Because it's just the wrong size for here. Like it just doesn't suit.
Hmm.
And they're like, yeah, yeah, no worries. So they swapped it for a 4.3. But by the time that happened, it was the end of the summer and it was winter again. And it was when it got windy. And so then I was just going out getting my arms stretched. And I was just like, oh, this is like, and I had a bit of a eureka moment where I persevered and I kind of clicked with it end of last year, and was kind of getting around on tacks and jibes and packing it away. Like because I've done so much prone foiling, once I'm on the foil and whenever I'm wing foiling, I'm always looking to ride bumps. So I'm always pumping, I'm always riding bumps. I'm never just like riding the wing foil. I'm just like, what can I do? So as soon as I was up on the foil and I could hook into a few bumps, I was like, oh, I pack it away. Yeah, I get that. I love that bit. But then, yeah, so then winter came again, and I was like, oh, I do a lot of kite surfing still in the winter because we get really good waves and really good wind, plus really good surf. So I was prone foiling a lot, and then I've just had, quite a few good sessions this year on the Power Wing. So I'm sort of, I'm enjoying it, but for sure it's hard. Like as a kite surfer, I knew all about bridles. So like my that first session, I've had sessions before, not so much. I've got a power pack at the moment, and that thing is really good at packing away and relaunching without getting tangled. But that first generation pocket rocket, I'd go out and I'd put it up in the air and I'd be like, I don't know how that's got so tangled, but it was fine on the beach and I've just stuffed it in
Yeah.
my impact vest and paddled out through the waves. And now I'm here, like, how has it tied itself in that much of a knot? And then I'm back on the beach sorting it out, trying to work it out, going, what? And I think as a kite surfer, you've got experience of dealing with bridles because I used to race with bridle kites. So you kind of know, but I'd imagine for someone that hasn't para winged, it's quite a daunting journey. And I think the telling part is how many para wings are for sale secondhand on eBay. A lot of people seem to get them and then are like, oh, this is, quite hard and not a whole heap of fun to start with. And so they
Yeah.
very quickly sort of turn away from it. And then I've got a friend on the South Coast and he was exactly the same. Like he got one, hated it and ditched it, but now he's gone back to it again and he's really enjoying it. So I think that second generation is definitely making it a lot easier. I've had way more fun sessions on the power pack, which is like the second gen, I guess, ozone power wing than I've had on the original first gen one. The first gen one was really good, and I could ride it and use it, but having kit, I think, in that sport that's easy just makes a big difference. And
Yeah.
having the right wind strength, which it just never seems to be the right wind strength. That's
Yeah, I mean,
the kicker.
you can, yeah, you can 100%. I can 100% agree. I mean, I went out the first time in over 30 knots with a 3 meter Roger in like, it was almost 0 degrees. But at least it got me on foil. You don't ride with a harness, the Pairwing, do you?
No, not often. I was riding today with a harness because I've really bad arthritis in my hands from typing too
Oof,
much for
okay.
the last 20 odd years. So winging and power winging are the two sports that really cause that problems. Like if I'm surfing, it's fine. If I'm kiting, it's fine because it's very light bar pressure. But when you're winging, it's like all there. So I've tried to start wearing a harness every wing session, but sometimes I'm just because you're testing different wings, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, there's not a harness line on that one. Oh, I can't be asked to mess around and put a harness line on it. So I'll just go out and use it. But today I was out and I was using a harness and I was like, oh, it makes it a lot easier when you're hacking up winds. So I should probably, put a harness on a bit more often. But yeah, I've always got everything in the van. Sometimes I'm just a bit too excited to get on the water to actually think logically about what I'm doing and get out there and go, yeah, I wish I had a harness. But the harness definitely makes a difference for sure.
I see with the reviews, I see wing boards, foils, e-foils, paddles. I don't see a Pairwing.
No, we haven't done a powering review yet because I wasn't having the best time with the Pocket Rocket, the first generation one, and then winter came and it was just like, oh, it just doesn't really work. So we've got review being done on the Pocket Rocket V2, which has been done by Brandon Scheid in Hood River. So he's helping us out a
Nice.
little bit on reviews because I'm like not perhaps the best expert on a power wing to be able to tell the difference between them all. Although now I feel a bit more comfortable doing it. And then yeah, there will be a Pocket Rocket review coming out at some point, but they actually never. They were meant to send that to us, and then it just didn't arrive until literally just after my wedding. So I only just got our hands on that one. So it just kind of comes down to the kit. But I tell you what, I take my hat off to the guys that did like reviews of all the power wings. I know you did, so that's like a good bit of service to go through and like test them all is a good effort.
Thank you, man. It's so easier now as I'm trying to review wings to get a wing that suits my riding capabilities. I mean, getting on the beach with 5, 7 pair of wings is so much easier than doing the same thing with wings. So yeah, that was a big plus. So we talked about reviews, and then you launched the podcast, and you're on episode what, like 20?
I think between the two podcasts, we've done probably about 20 because we've got a kite one and the foil one. But I actually started podcasting in 2018, and there's a podcast called Intriguing Beings, which I launched in I think it was
Oh
around
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
September of
saw that.
2018, and that's on I don't know 50 odd episodes or something. But I started podcasting because I'd had a really bad mountain bike accident, essentially snapped my foot off and snapped all the ligaments, trimalleolar fracture. It was like the worst thing you could do. Surgeons in France said, "Oh, you might not walk again." So it was a pretty bad break. I had 3 months non-weight bearing, lying in a bed, waiting for it to heal before I could start learning to walk again. And I had to learn to walk, and then it was just like I had to do a load of physio to see if I could get back. And so I basically suddenly had, we talk about time and being busy, right? I am lucky enough to call going to the beach my job. So as much as my family just laughs in my face when I was telling them how busy I was today, and they're like, "Did you go surfing now?" And I went, "Yeah, I went and filmed some power wings at the beach because it's work," and they're just laughing. I'm like, "Okay." So when I couldn't get on the water anymore because I'd done this really bad injury to my leg, I had all this time and I was really annoying all the staff at work because suddenly I was like on email all the time and on the phone all the time and going, "Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? We should be doing this. We should be doing," and they're just going, "My God, Rue's a nightmare. He preferred it when he was at the beach all day." And so I sort of thought, I've got all this time. What am I going to do? And podcasts weren't a massive thing back then. They sort of got that big boom, I think, during COVID. So I
Hmm.
knew that I was always having interesting conversations, through my job. I'd go on trips and I'd be sitting down with like Rafael Salas, the CEO of F1, or it might be Tilly Burl from Duotone, or whoever it was, Mike Raper from North, and I'd be having dinner with these guys and just chatting, and I'd known them for a long time anyway, and I would always sit there and go, wow, it was a really interesting conversation. I bet somebody would probably want to listen to that conversation given the opportunity. So it just gave me the idea to start recording them. So I started recording these podcasts, and they're a massive kind of hit. I mean, I then got my leg back and could start doing things. And then I was like, right, I've basically given myself even more work to do, because now I've got to do this bloody podcast every week. So I think I did it every week for 2 years for a season. Like I did, like, I don't know, 30 episodes or something each season. And I did a lot. And then I was like, right, I got to throttle it back. But the other thing that I did with those podcasts is they were all in person. So every
Oh,
interview I
nice.
did, I sat down with the person, and,
That's so
I'd be
much
in
better.
the room with them. And it was lovely, right? I really enjoyed it. And I did a really good one with Pete Cabrina, when he was
Nice.
still, head of Cabrina, and we were on the beach somewhere. I had him sat in the van, and he was really like, closed off, arms up like this, and didn't really want to talk. And his legs were up crossed on the dashboard, and I could just see his body language. And then after about 5 minutes, he kind of warmed up a bit, and then by the end, we were chatting for like an hour and a half, and it was like such a great episode. And it was just, I like that personal interaction of like being there with the people. So when COVID hit, I took that as a, right, I'm not traveling anymore. I'm not seeing these people anymore. I'm not going to start doing them over the internet. And that was probably a stupid decision. I maybe should have said, oh, I'm going to start doing them over the internet, because of course everyone then started doing them over the internet, and it's way easier to do it over the internet. And the software that we're chatting on now makes it super easy, right? It transcribes it all for you. It edits it, does all the audio, it's so good. So I was probably, maybe a bit silly. But at the time when COVID hit, I just bought a big house, which with my ex partner, and it had we had like a small farm on it. So suddenly I was doing a lot of farming and mowing and all sorts of crazy stuff. So it was probably the podcast took a back seat whilst I drove around on a quad bike with a mower and looked after a bunch of land. So yeah, so it kind of changed. But I love podcasts. I like having conversations with people. I find it really interesting. As you know, there's a lot of time that goes into it, right? I think
Yeah.
people just listen to them and they don't realize what the editing's like, not even just that, it's publishing it on all the different channels these days, right? You've got to upload it here, you've got to upload it there, you've got to do your social media clip, you've got to get all, and it's time, it does take time. I mean, I remember back when I was doing it originally, I would record it with like an audio recorder, like a proper audio recorder. Then I'd get that
Nice.
file, put it into GarageBand, and then I'd
Ah,
chop it all
nice.
up and edited it in GarageBand, and then I'd
That
run
takes
it
forever.
through this like free podcast software, which was it was like an audio software. I can't remember what it's called now, but that basically allowed you to like fix any audio issues and like get rid of some noise and do a few bits like that. And then, yeah, it'd be uploading it to some random podcast host that would then send it on as an RSS feed to like Spotify. Whereas, of course, now Spotify, you can host all your podcasts there, and they make it so much easier and so much simpler. So, yeah, it used to take me, I reckon it was a good day, 8 to 10 hours to edit before. Whereas now,
But
I
it's
can
now it's
probably
still
do it in
3 to 4 hours,
3 hours.
isn't
Yeah,
it?
3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's still 3 to 4 hours. Like if you sit down
Yeah.
on a Monday morning and start editing, it's lunchtime by the time you're finished with that little project. So it's
Yeah.
time consuming. And then that's what means I don't do as many as perhaps I should, because it's busy. Plus, the other thing that no one talks about, it's taken us, what, I think you contacted me end of January or something, and we're now in
Yeah.
June. It takes time. Like, I mean, how much time have you wasted going, hey, Rou, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm
That's
really busy this
honestly,
week.
that's not wasted time. That's like the pre-talk, and I think it's all
Yeah,
super important.
that's the
The
warm up.
hardest thing for me is actually time zones, man. I thought, I
Yeah,
mean, how difficult can it be? But then it's just, it's such a pain. I mean, I've
yeah,
almost
it is
missed
hard.
2 podcasts due to that. That's the most difficult, and we are 1 hour apart, so that's fine. But, like, talking to someone in Hawaii, for example, yeah, you gotta
Yeah.
take time, like, at 4 AM. or something.
Yeah, and then you're like feeling really tired, and you're like, oh, and then something happens that day, and you're like, oh my god, like I've got to stay up till get or set an alarm at 4 a.m. and go and have a chat with someone. But I love the process of it. I love the conversations. I love what comes out of it. You know, I
Yeah,
think it's really interesting, and I've always kind of like chatting to people. So yeah, you learn stuff, right? It's like you're getting to ask all these
definitely.
amazing questions and find out stuff for yourself that hopefully other people find interesting too.
How do you choose your guests? Do they ask you if they can come on, or do you ask them?
So sometimes they do, and I'm always a bit like, if someone asks if they can come on, I'm a bit like, "Hmm." So
Why?
I have had people ask before, and then I've just kind of just said, "Oh, I've got a load at the moment. We're really busy at the moment," or whatever. But generally, like at the moment, it's kind of product led. So because we're linking the podcast with the content in the magazine, I'm trying to think, okay, what's happening. So I'm trying to hook
Mhm.
one up with Army at the moment because they've just released all the new Armstrong gear. So it's kind of like product led. We just did TSDU for starboard foils because they've just released their new foiling gear. So that's released as a podcast, but the actual magazine content will be coming out in the next issue. So it's kind of like looking at what's new, what's hot. I'd like, what would really help me is having someone organize that whole choice of who you're interviewing and stuff like that. I did one with someone, and he had someone that did all the back end, and all he did was show up and have the chat. And I was like, well, that's pretty dreamy because the chat's the 1 hour to hour and a half easy bit. And then the hard bit's all the stuff around it. So if someone could just say, hey, Roo, can you sit down in front of your microphone and your camera at this time? I'd be like, yeah, that's easy. It's for me, it's getting the headspace to think, right, who have I got to interview now? Who have I got to chat to now? What
But,
time am I
I
doing that?
think that would make the conversation harder because you're not that much involved. You don't
True.
didn't do research, and probably, the questions that you're gonna ask are just gonna be not motivated from the same spot. Because, like,
Yeah.
yes, we talked for a long time. I looked at all your stuff, or I
You're
hope
like,
I
he's
looked at
busy.
all your stuff. Yeah, but I think that helps for the conversation later on. Last, I think 2 episodes ago, or no, when this airs, like 3 or 4 episodes ago, I talked to Alja Švazić from 777 Pairwings. I didn't prepare anything because I was so involved. I knew everything I wanted to ask, and I feel like the conversation was smoother that way.
Yeah.
So,
It's always good. I mean, I one thing I never do is I never write down any questions. So I've had a few people say, "Oh, can you send me all the questions?" I'm like, "No,
yeah.
I'm not going to write any questions down. I mean, if you want, I can give you some themes because I know I want to
Yeah, yeah.
ask about the product and ask about this, but I always try and just sort of, jump in with a bit of history about where they've come from and what they're doing, and then lead from there, and maybe make sure that if there's certain things that they want to touch on, I'll do it. But yeah, I try and keep the prep to a minimum. But like you say, you're interested in that person, which is why you're doing a podcast with them. So there's a good
Yeah.
chance you know quite a bit about what they're doing because you've probably been looking on the internet at all of their stuff and thinking, "Oh, that's pretty cool. I'm interested in that, so I want to
Exactly.
find out more about it." So yeah, but I do enjoy the process of it. It's just like you say, the edit. I think a lot of people don't realize how much time gets sucked away by doing that.
Your magazine is just online, not on
Yeah,
paper, is it?
no. So
Um, have you
we
ever thought about
launched
doing it on paper?
No, we launched in 2006, and broadband internet wasn't a thing. So basically, there was still dial-up internet in most countries, but broadband was just starting, and it was like 500, whatever it was, like 500 bits or something, rather than 24 bits or whatever you got down your telephone line. It was nuts. And I'd worked in publishing all my life, right? So I'd worked for newspapers, for magazines, always selling advertising, and then I'd worked as the editor on this kite surfing paper magazine for a long time, and well, 2 years, not that long, but the publisher was a bit of a challenging person, should we say, which is why I decided to start my own business because I was like, you're not paying me any money and I'm doing all this work for you, and that doesn't seem fair. I reckon I can do a better job myself. And then I learned what being an editor is compared to what being a publisher is a very different, massive kettle of fish in terms of all the extra work that you've got to do and everything else that you've got to manage. But with paper, I was in the airport the other day, flying to Defi Wind, and we used to do a mountain bike magazine. I'm having a look at the magazine rack in the airport. And of course, there's no foiling magazines in there because there's only one paper foiling magazine, and they're not going to be in there because you have to distribute a certain amount of copies before they'll even entertain having you in there. But the biggest mountain bike magazine in the UK used to be called Mountain Bike UK. And to my mind, it still is the biggest mountain bike magazine in the UK. So I was like, oh, let's see if it's on the magazine rack. And it's there on the magazine rack. I'm like, oh, let's have a look. I haven't seen this for like 3 years, I think, since we last did a mountain bike magazine, or 2 years. So we've kind of been out of that industry. And I picked it up, and it's like a pamphlet. Like, it's about 40
Really?
pages, 50 pages. That's it. It's so thin. There's nothing to it. And it just felt really cheap and nasty. And I'm going, my God, this is like the biggest magazine for one of the biggest action sports in the UK, right? Mountain biking is huge in the UK. It's massively popular. We've got, world champions. Some of the best mountain bikers come from the UK, and it's always been a huge sport. And this magazine's tiny, and I'm just looking at it going, well, that just says everything about the paper magazine industry, right? If that gigantic magazine with such a huge readership can only sell, I think it was like 3 adverts in the whole magazine, then
Wow.
it's not making any money. The only reason it's still being published is because it's part of a larger publishing organization that's keeping it afloat. But it's essentially, that whole paper magazine industry, I think it's kind of dead. And I know that, some people disagree with that are maybe listening, but when I worked at the Kitesurf UK magazine, he used to tell me, the publisher, that we sold 15,000 copies, right? 15,000 copies. That's how many copies we sold. So I started changing things and doing some cool stuff. And one issue, we changed the logo and the way the front cover looked, because it always looked a bit windsurfy and crap. And I was like, let's make it look cool and like make it look a bit grunge. And I was, in my early 30s, maybe late 20s. So it was all about being cool back then. And so we changed the front cover, and then he never questioned anything I did with the magazine. Like, he never asked me what I was doing or checked. And we used to get away with publishing some really mad stuff in there, like really stupid things that we'd put in that I thought was funny at the time, that, I'm sure a lot of people were like, this is not funny, but there you go. That's what you get when you get the run of the mag. And he pulled me into the office, and he was really cross because he said, I can't believe this. This is terrible. What have you done to the front cover? This is awful. We've paid all this money to have this magazine produced. And they'd sold, I think it was 1,200 copies. And I was like, oh my God, so you used to sell 15,000 and now you've only sold 1,200. Like, yeah, I agree. That's terrible. You should probably sack me. He's like, no, we only ever sell 1,600 to 2,000. We just tell people that it's 15,000. And I'm like, oh, okay. I've been like trying to sell ads into this and talking to my friends that work in the industry and selling them adverts saying, hey, it's 15,000 copies. So there's this thing in paper publishing that's it's not widely known, but essentially if you wanted to be in the WH Smiths or the magazine stores, you had to publish a certain amount of copies. And so what you would do is you would publish 16,000 copies, say, right? And then the distributor that picks up those copies from the printer, he knows that you're not going to sell all those copies, right? So he doesn't want to distribute them to all the shops and then pick them all back up at the end. So instantly from those 16,000 copies, 8,000 get put into recycling straight away. Like, that's it. It's done, right? And then what happens is that remaining 8,000, they get distributed to the shops. And maybe half of them sell, because you always want to have magazines on the rack. You never want to have an empty rack. There's always got to be magazines on the rack. So maybe at that 16,000, you might sell 4,000 if you're lucky, and another 4,000 end up in recycling, right? So it's just a terrible industry in that format. Now, what some of the magazines do now that are paper magazines, they obviously don't market to the WH Smiths and these big magazine stores. So they're not trying to chase those numbers anymore, but they're not selling anywhere near the numbers that they say they're selling. They'll say, oh, we're selling this. And, that people aren't paying for those magazines. When COVID hit, there were 2 big international kite surfing magazines, and they were saying that they had like 30,000 subscribers. And I'm thinking, wow, if you've got 30,000 subscribers, that's like 60 grand an issue just in revenue from your subscribers. Like, that is mega money that you're bringing in. But if you look at Companies House, They aren't making anywhere near that money. And then when COVID hit, they all went, oh, yeah, we're going to stop publishing because we can't distribute our magazines because of COVID. And it's like, well, hang on, if you've got all these subscribers that you're physically shipping copies to and making a couple of quid on each one, that wouldn't be an issue. But yeah, it was an issue. So I think the paper industry is a bit of a misnomer. All you've got to do is make a nice magazine, send it to the person that matters, i.e. the CEO of the company, and tell him you're printing 60,000 of them, and that's basically your business model. I'll get flamed for saying that, but it's true. I worked in paper publishing for a long time.
Are you, and that was actually something that I wrote down. Are you in contact at all with Rich Barton from the Foiling Mag?
Yeah, so I know Rich really well. He's a nice lad, and we've done a few trips together. So what a lot of people maybe don't realize is the magazine industry is a lot smaller than it used to be, right? Because the model's just not there for the magazine industry as it used to be. So most of the paper magazines have now gone. Foiling Mag's still around, and they do the Kite Mag as well. So Alex and those guys, they're obviously doing a good job. Rich is a lovely guy. I've been on trips with him, right? One of the things that happens is we all end up going on trips together. A brand, not so much these days, but they're doing a product launch. They'll fly all the journalists over. They want all the stories and the articles. And so you're hanging out and having a good time with him, and I've absolutely love hanging out with Rich when I see him. He's very, very knowledgeable, and he's very good at what he does in terms of testing foils and wings and products, and he's got a really good outlook on how he does things. So yeah, I like Rich a lot. And interestingly, there was a guy, Jim, who's now the marketing manager at Ozone, or in charge of marketing at Ozone, and he used to run the Kite Mag, not Kite Mag, Kite World magazine, which was long seen as one of our major competitors. But the reality was we were going on trips all the time, and we were really good mates, and we're both really similar. He came to my wedding. He was here 2 weekends ago. My latest Facebook post, that's me and him surfing together. So, there's sort of meant to be this rivalry between the mags. But generally, you sort of get on and recognize that you're in each other's spaces. I mean, we were only ever really the only digital magazine, and the ones that really put an effort on digital. And so we weren't really treading on people's toes like that. But yeah, there's a good bit of camaraderie between them. Like, I know the German guys really well, and always enjoy hanging out with them. But the sad thing these days is there's not so many press trips, because the brands haven't got as much money. So there was a time when 11 months of the year I wouldn't be in the country. I'd just be traveling around, taking photos, looking at cool products, having a great time. This is all pre-winging, in the glory days of kite surfing, and brands are spending a fortune. They're taking me to Madagascar and Mauritius and like all these crazy places, and you're just going, this is nuts. And now budgets are so tight that just doesn't happen anymore. They're really, really tight on what they're spending. So that, yeah, don't get to do as much travel, but hey, I still enjoy hanging out with those guys when I see them.
And it looks like it's still enough to run your magazine. Your magazine is not behind a paywall.
No.
Is that
So
something that you had to consider at all? Or is that, something that you would never do?
yeah, so it's basically for us, it's all about the numbers. So we sell our advertisers on the fact that we have the largest audience out there in terms of web traffic and how many people are coming through to the site. And as soon as you even ask them for an email address, then that's a turn off, right? Any barrier to entry is a stop point from them actually accessing the magazine. So for us, it's like, if you see a link on Facebook or Instagram or wherever it might be, you can click that link, you're straight away seeing the content. There's no request for your email address. There's no sign up here. There's no, oh, this is premium content, you need to pay or whatever. It just, it just doesn't really work, I don't think. We have a voluntary option that people can volunteer to give us like £2 if they want to give us £2. And even getting £2 out of people, like, I could count on not two hands, but I wouldn't need that many pairs of hands to count how many people are prepared to give you a few quid. And massive hats off to anyone listening that does give us a few quid. It makes all the difference. But it's kind of sad in a way, because if we could flip the model so that we were getting paid by the reader, it would make it a much more interesting proposition. But the trouble is, the reader's so used to getting everything for free, it's so hard to get them
Yeah.
to engage with actually, parting with a bit of cash. We had a guy the other day say, I've got to cancel my subscription. I was like, yeah, no problem. And he's like giving us £1.50 a month. I'm like, wow, times must be pretty hard if you're enjoying our content. And he'd been, subscribed with us for like a year and a bit. So he's obviously engaged and he enjoyed our content and he's, happy to support us. And that's fantastic. But I think it's a sign of the times that people just don't, want to part with any cash these days. Which leads me on to
100%, man.
the other thing, which I think is a worrying potential future, is obviously a lot of this money is being spent on Facebook and Instagram and other places, and the independent media is getting squeezed by these big companies. And I'm sure you find, it's hard to get money from brands because they're, struggling and, they're all not quite got the sales that they were hoping. And the Iran war kind of really didn't help. I really thought this year was going to be a positive year for the industry. And then that came along and it's kind of sideswiped everything and pushed up material costs and factory costs and things like that. So I think it's going to be another tough year. But what's really hard is if there is no independent media in the future, I think that's a really scary place for the industry to be. And I don't think they realize it, because whilst they can have their newsletter, publish their own social media, they're reaching their own audience all the time, right? They're not
Yeah.
reaching outside of that audience. So they're all they're doing is selling to people who are already engaged in their equipment. And that's great. But that way you're never really growing your piece of the pie, right? You're just accepting that you're going to be here at a level and that's it. And, no one, Mark Zuckerberg's not going to be reviewing your kite or, writing a story about your brand or interviewing your CEO or doing anything for you ever, right? He's never going to do any of that. All you're going to be doing is feeding his platform and feeding his algorithm and giving him a shit ton of money. And maybe you'll get some sales from it. We ran a sunglasses company and it was basically all the money we put in, we got back in sales, but it was a shit ton of work and it didn't really make us any profit. It was just like, wow, the sales have gone up, but hang on, we're spanking all this money out the door. Like, it just didn't really make sense. And I think there's a danger that a lot of brands and, marketing managers are just thinking, oh, we'll just do it all ourselves. We'll just do all our own marketing. We'll just do it ourselves. And that's how we'll do it. And I just think it kind of, sucks a little bit that there's people out there working really hard to generate content that people enjoy, that's being shared on these platforms. But if there isn't support for those people, where does that content go? And then all you're going to be left with is press releases from the magazines, press releases from the brands,
Yeah.
and videos from the brands and reviews from the brands, and then you lose all of that honesty and all of that independent media. So I think there's a shift that perhaps needs to happen in the industry where they sort of take a bit of a look at themselves and go, you know what, the independent media has always been there, and without it, I think the sport's a pretty dark place.
Actually, what you're just saying, that's why I thought I could contribute also to something because I'm an average rider, very average rider. I don't do jumps or anything. I still work on maneuvers and whatnot. And I also try to show my fails so people don't just see the pros who can work with anything.
I've
So
seen your
if
vids. You're quite a good rider.
it really depends who you're comparing yourself to. I ride sometimes with Baltz, with Michi, when I pump
Well,
flat, I
there,
ride
yeah,
with
yeah,
Rob. And those guys can do anything, and I really
yeah.
cannot. So I think for this, I think it's important to also show some fails, some things that are hard. If I don't like a product, I say I don't like the product. I don't say it's shit. I say I don't like it. Maybe I'm just not good enough as well. That can always be a possibility. But also to, just one, have someone who's out on the water on the weekend, as you've said. Like I
Yeah.
can now, right now, I would have a wing and a pair wing to test. There's just no wind around. And if there's wind, I have to work. So it's just the view of this average person who gets on foil sometimes. And I thought that was not shown enough. So I thought that's where I come in. But you already touched on it a little bit. And I just want your opinion again. If you look at people like myself, am I taking away from your professional work, from what you do? Because, yeah, sometimes, or maybe brands they look more towards like someone like Gav or other like independent people.
It's
How's that for you?
definitely it's definitely the market is definitely diluted, right? So I think, but then it used to be there was a whole load of magazines. And so that was
Okay.
diluted because you're competing with loads of magazines. Whereas now you're
Hmm.
competing with, there's a few online personalities doing really good content. What I think's interesting about that is the longevity of it. And, you know, when you're doing it for fun and you're getting a bit of money out of it, it's great. But there can come a time where something happens in your life and it changes and you're like, oh, I don't have time for this anymore. I've just had another kid. I can't be, because it's hard work, right? It's not easy producing videos, producing podcasts. It's hard to do it. And so I think what happens is there's a danger that, um, there's that shift towards people just generating content, and then when those people move away and they stop doing it, like I think, was it Dave West? I used to really enjoy his videos, and he's not doing
Yeah,
so
a
many
lot.
anymore because he's got a new job, right? So it's kind of like, oh, you lose these personalities because they've got to make a living, and they're in the real world like we all are. So yeah, I think it's always, a challenge, but I like to think that what we do is quite different to what a lot of, people like you've mentioned and yourself do. Yes, there's the podcasting side of it, but what we've got is a huge audience that we've, garnered over 20 odd years of, building up a, network of people that we work with, but also people that engage with our content. So it's kind of focusing on that. But for sure, some of the brands will be like, oh yeah, we're pulling budget from this and we're going to stick it all in this podcast. One of the brands that we just got on board recently, we were chatting to them about coming on board, and they were like, oh, we want to be connected with like the French market a bit more. And I said, well, here's our French readership numbers. They're pretty decent. They're higher than the French magazine traffic that they were getting. So we're getting more people from France check our stuff than the French magazines get in. But they just said, oh no, we want to go with French language. So they went with this website. I'm not going to mention the name, but they went with this website, and I was like, okay, fine. We lost out there. It's not a problem. And then about 8 months later, I reach out. I'm like, hey, how's it going? What's the response been like? You guys happy? And they're like, no, we're a bit disappointed. Like, it doesn't really feel like much has been going on. I said, well, let's have a little look. So I looked at their web traffic from this website, and it was like 1,200 people had been to it in the last 3 months or something. It was just awful. And I
Okay,
was
yeah.
like, 150,000 had been to our website. So I just screenshot it, sent it to the marketing manager. I'm like, look, I said we could do some stuff for you. I'm pretty sure we could do some stuff for you. And that's kind of hard. It's like sometimes these people, perhaps they don't look into like what the numbers are. And so they're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this because it's different. And then it doesn't work out. And it's like, okay, well, there's a product here that's got real tangible figures that can make a real difference to what you're doing. So I always feel like we should probably be, the first choice, and then they can filter out afterwards. But it's interesting because now they're working with us. They're super happy with what we've done. We've done a few podcasts for them. We've published things for them. And this website, I won't mention names, but I looked, and they'd posted like 6 news stories in 8 months. That was it. 6 stories in 8 months, which is why their traffic's
Yeah.
so low, because their last news post was like 2 months old. So no one's going to their website or checking it out. And I think that's the thing with when you're doing it professionally, and when you're paying staff to publish these stories, all the time, to make sure you've got the traffic and to make sure you're growing the business. It's a very different kind of thing to someone who's just doing it as a bit of a hobby, maybe just for a bit of fun. But the other flip side of that is perhaps the brands then go, oh, well, it's cheap to be here, and they don't realize that the reason we charge a premium is because we've got to do all the work behind it, right? And it's a
Yeah.
full-time job
Yeah.
for a few people to make it happen. And yeah, so it's one of those things. But there's no one really doing digital online magazine that we're doing, but it's, for us, it's more about our newsletter now, which is pretty huge, and also the website traffic is really big, and the social media traffic is really big. So in fact, we get more people engaging through that than we do the digital magazine. The digital magazine is like a small part of what we do, but a lot of people really enjoy like having the digital magazine on the app, on their app, on their phone. They can look through it, read it, enjoy it. So we kind of feel like you've got to do a bit of everything to keep everyone engaged.
If people are still listening now over an hour, can you maybe just, repeat the Insta handle, the website where people can find you?
Yeah, so you can check out Tonic Mag anywhere. I think it's at Tonic Mag on Instagram and Facebook. If you do a Google search for it, you'll find it. Web address is www.tonicmag.com. And yeah, it's free content. It's really good content. I think you'll enjoy it. If you haven't engaged with it yet, then definitely go and check it out. If you've been listening to my voice for just over an hour, then you should probably at least go and check out the website and see what it's all about.
Definitely. We're going to link everything down there. Rou, as we've said, we've been away in over an hour. Is there anything else that you want to tell the audience? Maybe what's coming next?
So we've got a few things that we're working on. We're doing a lot more video content at the moment. So anyone that's on our YouTube will have seen that there's a bit more of that coming. So we're going to be aiming to pump out a video a week, launching that in the next couple of months. So we're just sort of working on getting a bit of a stock of videos so that we've got enough that we can have a moment where something goes wrong and we can't publish anything, or it's raining and the conditions are bad and we can't publish stuff. So we're going to be working on that a lot more. Obviously, the podcasts that we've been doing, that's a fairly new thing as well. So check out the Foil Pod or the Kite Pods, depending on what your flavor is. But yeah, I really enjoyed chatting, Matt. And what I would say is the nicest thing is when we say goodbye, I don't have to go and sit and edit this for a few hours. So I get to go and sit down and enjoy the rest of my evening. And I know, you've got the pain of actually putting it all together. So thanks for having me on and thanks for giving me the opportunity.
You're welcome, man. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I really hope to see you on the water sometime, man.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Be good to cross paths actually in real life. I always really enjoy that when that happens.
All right, man. Have a good night. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. Cheers.